Welcome back to the SSL Family Dad channel. Today I'd like to invite you to tag along for making maple syrup. Usually when maple syrup season comes around, I've already been burning wood since October, and it's the end of March here. So I'm usually running low on good wood, and a lot of times what I have found actually works best for boiling is using a lot of smaller sticks. They burn faster and you have to tend the fire more, but they burn, it produces a lot of heat really quickly. Whereas I can put a couple big pieces of oak in here and they might burn a lot longer, but they're not going to produce the heat as quickly. And what I really want is just as much heat energy as I can getting into that pan as quickly as possible. So also this is a good opportunity for me to burn some of the pine that I've collected over the season that doesn't really work really well in my indoor stoves or my outdoor boiler. So we got a lot of boiling left to do. Start to see the color of the sap start to change. It starts to get that amber color there, you can see. Well, it's 1 in the morning. This is just what happens sometimes. So it's been boiling and boiling, and I'm down to the end here. So there's a couple inches in the pan. This is always the moment to make that decision. I can put the fire out and leave it in here till morning, let it kind of evaporate off a little bit more, and then get it in the morning, and run the risk of fire starting back up or something and it burning up or over evaporating. Or I can put the fire out and take the sap in, which I think is the right choice, so we don't have any more burn up accidents. So we'll, what I normally do is I just have a pre-filter that I brought out, and I'll just use a bucket, and I'll stick the bucket underneath there and put the pre-filter over this hose, just to make sure any junk that's in the pan, any debris or anything like that, is going to get filtered out. I only want to take in the, at least fairly filtered sap, concentrate, and we'll get it that all in the bucket, and we'll take it up to the house, and then tomorrow we'll finish it off inside. So everything from out there reduced down to about 5 gallons, a little more than 5 gallons in here on the stove. So this is just a canning pot that we use, and we'll heat it up real slow. You don't want to burn it. You want to warm it up nice and slow, get it to a boil, and we'll reduce that down, and then I'll get it into some smaller pots as soon as I get it down to about a gallon or two. I have several different pots that I prefer to use to finish the syrup off. This one here is has a little thicker wall, and it seems to require a lot less heat to bring the syrup to a boil. We spend a lot of time with finishing it. I don't try to rush it, because if it boils over, it makes a huge sticky, sugary, burnt mess on the stove, and so I do it real slow. And once we boil it down about 3/4 of the way in this pot, we're going to be getting pretty close to syrup, and so I'll show you how we test it for sugar content to know when it's finished. So we're getting down to the end here. We've got the everything concentrated into this one pot, and like I said earlier, as we continue to boil, I'm just turning the temperature down lower and lower and lower, so we're almost at low here and just barely keeping it at a boil. So it's probably at this point, just because I know this stove and I know the syrup, that it's probably pretty close to finished. Now how we check whether it's finished or not is a couple different ways. The way I do here is I use a hydrometer. I will put a link to all this stuff on Amazon, because this is where I got everything from. Or you can use a candy thermometer. There's different ways to do this. You can look up instructions on how to use a candy thermometer. Basically you boil it until it gets to a certain temperature. I think it's 219 degrees, and then it's done. With the hydrometer, I'm going to fill up this test cup and then basically float this this thing in there, which I'll show you how that works. And once it gets to the level, the correct level, there's little red marks on here, cold and hot. I'm using the hot level. Once it gets to that point, then you know that the sugar content of your maple syrup is at the right level. And once we get there, we'll keep it boiling as low as possible, and we'll get everything set up to get it bottled. Okay, we are at a boil here, and it's foaming up, so that means we are probably pretty close to syrup, if not past it. So all this is doing is just measuring the sugar content. Sugar content has to be at a certain level in order for it to be considered finished syrup. So the hydrometer will float, and if we're at that top line, so we're floating about one or two lines above the red lines. So we're real close. We'll go ahead and let that boil for about another 5 minutes, and then we'll call it good. Well, this beautiful contraption right here is how I have filtered and bottled syrup for years. This is basically 2 stools. I grabbed 2 broomsticks I took off of some brooms, and I have my filter system, which I have also used for years. This is a pre-filter, and this is a wool fiber filter. It's a final filter, cone filter. And so a lot of times if I'm doing a lot of syrup, you can actually double or triple these pre-filters up, and then once the first one gets clogged, you just pull it out and then wash it off, and then the next one gets clogged, you pull it out. And so that way your syrup will pass through the filter a lot quicker. Since I'm only doing about a gallon or less of syrup here, I'm not worried about that. One pre-filter is plenty. So the pre-filter will help really filter out a lot of the larger stuff, and then as it goes through the final cone filter, it gets the smaller stuff. So what we're filtering out is just the mineral and any impurities, anything that has gotten in the syrup, throughout the process of boiling here. That's just going to drip into this small pot. And then there's all kinds of different bottles you can use, of course, but these I ordered, I can't remember, I think Specialty Bottle was the place that I ordered these from. These are 12-ounce bottles. And I have a bunch of caps for these as well that I got, and we have labels and stuff like that we use. So these are just sauce bottles, but you could use, of course, regular old maple syrup bottles or whatever. You could use just mason jars as well. The trick with this stuff is keeping everything sterilized. So actually I put all of these bottles in the dishwasher on a sanitized cycle, and the caps and all the tools I'm using and the pots and all that stuff, and so that gets up above boiling, and then all this will be nice and sanitary so that we don't get any impurities in there. We don't want to have bacteria and stuff like that in the syrup. Otherwise what happens, you can get little mold spots that float on the top of the syrup, which doesn't ruin it. You can scrape those off, but it's kind of gross. I also get this wet. So this has been, I rinse this off with hot water and then wring it out. And so it's a little bit wet. That helps the syrup pass through there a little quicker. So we're ready to filter and bottle. So this is the finished product from tree to bottle. We have purchased some labels that we designed as well that we use with some of the ones. We used to sell maple syrup when we had the farm because we had quite a few more trees to tap and we had kind of a bigger operation there. But the process is not that difficult. I have done so many videos on maple syrup. If you're just getting into it or you're interested in getting into it, check out a bunch of the other videos I have. I will put a link to the playlist that I have of all of our maple syrup stuff, the stuff that we did on the farm, the stuff that we did small scale, big scale, and the stuff that we have done here. But you can actually make a decent amount of maple syrup with just a few trees. I mean, if you tapped 10 trees, you could make yourself a couple gallons of syrup for the year if you tap early and you make sure you don't waste any and don't miss any of the season. So hopefully this gave you at least an overview of what it takes to make maple syrup from start to finish. And if you have questions, I would love to answer any questions that you have. Even if the video gets old, I do monitor comments and respond to people's questions if they are not already answered in the video. Don't forget to hit thumbs up on today's video. Share this with friends and family if somebody else out there might be interested in how to make maple syrup. As always, guys, thanks for watching. Have a good one.